Wagwan squad. Today we are the Gungo rice and peas and oxtail. I spent a good amount of time testing out and coming up with a spice blend for this one. Extremely delicious, flavor packed and easy. And as usual, I will show you a couple tips for a great pot of oxtail. This is so good, warm and spicy with a lot of depth, and it works with more than just oxtail. I have been testing this spice blend for a little while now, and this is it. I'll place the recipe in the description. Let's start with the pre-ground spices. Half tablespoon turmeric, a tablespoon of paprika, a tablespoon of dried ground chili, garlic powder 2 tablespoons, coriander powder 1 tablespoon. Now for the whole spices, which we will blend separately. Cinnamon and star anise. Star anise is very powerful. A small piece is good. If you can immediately identify star anise when you taste your food, it's too much. About a teaspoon of cloves, great with oxtail. Another great flavor for oxtail, about 5 bay leaves, 2 tablespoons red chili flakes for that warm chili flavor, dried pimento or allspice 3 tablespoons. This complements beef especially well and adds deep complex flavor. A coffee grinder would give this a nice even grind, but a good blender is also able to do the job. Go ahead and throw everything in the blender, and bear in mind that this is guaranteed to make you sneeze when you start to blend. I also want 1/4 cup brown sugar. This will help a bit with browning the oxtail when we get to that. And a tablespoon of salt. That smells really good. Warm, spicy and fragrant is the best way to describe this. Next, combine this with the pre-ground spices. Also, you can toast the whole spices a bit to unlock more flavor, but untoasted spices work with oxtail. Still going to unlock some of the flavors from the spices in the browning process. That smells so good. Sharp, warm and very spicy. I tried this with turkey neck and it was the most delicious thing. Alright, let's talk about oxtail. This is about 2.5 pounds. There are only so many tails on one cow, so a problem you might encounter with oxtail is pieces from cattle of different ages. Notice the yellow fatty tissue. That's a significantly older cattle, which means deeper flavors but also tougher meat, which will take much longer to cook. This is one thing I forgot to look out for when I purchased it. This might be a problem, but let's run with it. I already rinsed these with some fresh lime juice, so next I'm going to pat them dry before seasoning. This will ensure that the spices really adhere to the oxtail and I get a proper sear when I'm browning off this later. The fat ratio on these oxtail is great. There's some extra fatty tissue. I'm going to use this because it's very flavorful, but if the oxtail were fattier, I would be removing some instead. I'm going to separate about 3/4 cup of that oxtail spice. I added a significant amount of salt in the spice, so this is the only season we will use on the oxtail. I want this to be coated generously on every bit of the oxtail. This is really flavorful but not overpowering, so I don't have to worry so much about using too much. Just listen to the spirits. A nice ratio of fat to meat like I have here will give me a rich flavorful gravy when the oxtail is cooked. But much more than this will make the finished dish overly greasy. Fat is very important for mouthfeel, flavor and our perception of juiciness, so we actually do want some. I love cooking oxtail because you can use a lot of bold flavors. Alright, this is going into the fridge to chill for maybe an hour. This is really good. I'm going to package this up and place it in the freezer. You probably don't have to place this in the freezer, but it will keep a lot better for longer. This is how rice and peas should look. You can count each grain and it's perfectly cooked. Let's get into it. So I'm using gungo or pigeon peas for this rice and peas. Here I have 1 cup of dried gungo peas. You can get this right throughout the year, but you mostly get fresh green gungo peas around Christmas time. Dried or fresh, they taste about the same way, maybe some small differences, but the main difference is that dried gungo will take significantly longer to cook. You also can get it in a can. I'm going to add about 3 cups of water. That will reduce significantly before it's completely cooked. This will take anywhere from upwards of 30 minutes to an hour to cook depending on the peas. Using canned coconut milk is one way to make this next step really easy, but processing dried coconut yourself would give you so much more flavor. This will give me about 2.5 to 3 cups of milk. As soon as the peas are halfway cooked through and most of the water is reduced, I will add the coconut milk. I saved some of the coconut pulp that I blended, so I'm adding about 2 to 3 tablespoons. 1 medium onion diced, 4 cloves of garlic diced, half a dozen dried pimento, 1 green scotch bonnet pepper, fresh thyme, and a stalk of scallion. I'm just throwing in the whole thing. Next I'm going to let this simmer until the peas are cooked. It's about halfway there. That's a lot of liquid, but by the time the peas cook completely, it should be close to the amount we want. Alright, let that cook while we check in on the oxtail. Just grab that out of the fridge. That's well seasoned. Next we are going to brown that off. Just going to shift that over to our next burner. Oxtail is really fatty, so I'm going to be conservative with the oil, but I still need oil. Throw in the fatty tissue of the oxtail to render and add flavor. Next, I will add as much pieces of oxtail that will comfortably fit. If I overcrowd it, they won't brown properly. I have the heat on medium-low so these can get a nice even brown without burning. I will be using this oil again. We'll get into that in a minute, so I don't need any charring. We could also brown these off in the oven. That's an option, but I like doing everything in one pot. That deep brown crust is what we want. This step is critical for building up flavor. Without proper browning, your oxtail will taste spoiled, and we don't want that. I'm just going to flip and let the other side brown. Oxtail is generally tough, so what most people do is use a pressure cooker to really cut the cooking time, but you can also use a slow cooker. Just set it and forget it. Me personally, I really like the hands-on stuff, braising on the stove top and adjusting flavors as it reduces. Browning in the oven renders way more fat than browning in a pot, so you could easily get rid of extra fat that way if your oxtail is too fatty. So that might be a benefit of browning in the oven. Alright, we can now go ahead and remove that final batch of oxtail. There's a bit of juices with some fat mixed in, so I'm going to add that back into the pot. Next, add 2 tablespoons of brown sugar to the pot. I'm going to caramelize this, but you can always skip this because it's sometimes tricky to get right, so you can just use browning instead, but sugar gives me a better final product in my opinion. That's good enough, so I'm going to add a head of roughly chopped garlic, 1 large diced onion, 1/4 cup chopped celery, a tablespoon of grated ginger, and about a cup of diced tomatoes. Just let that saute. The juices from the vegetables will deglaze the pan and reduce down. We want this to really caramelize. We are still building flavors. That smells divine. That's good, so we can go ahead now and add in the browned oxtail with any resting juices, if there are any. Soy sauce, 1 cup to help deglaze that some more. 1 cup of tomato ketchup for a bit of acidity and to give the gravy some body. I'm adding about 3 tablespoons oyster sauce. This isn't typical in Jamaican oxtail, but it adds a ton of savory flavor. That right there is a flavor bomb. To max out the flavor of oxtail, you can use beef broth as your braising liquid, but I'm just using water. This has great depth of flavor already, and when this reduces, we will end up with a flavor packed pot of oxtail. Really submerge that because this is going to take a while. We already saw that some of them are old and therefore they will be tougher. I'm anticipating probably 2 hours of cooking, so just cover that up and let it do its thing. In the meantime, let's check out the peas. That's reduced to about 3 cups liquid. You can see the coconut oil on top of that liquid. These are firm but still cooked through completely, which is what we want. Give that a quick taste to check flavor. Good, time to season. I'm adding a tablespoon of brown sugar, optional, and a generous pinch of salt. I want this just slightly saltier than the finished product. Perfect. Rice. I'm using Basmati rice today. This is super forgiving and easy to get right. Based on the liquid, I'm going to need 2.5 cups of rice. The reason I wanted the liquid slightly saltier than I want the finished pot is because the fresh rice will bring down the saltiness. Just accounting for that. A couple washes should be good. The water is almost totally clear. From the looks of this, it's the perfect amount. Cover that and leave it on medium-low heat for about 8 to 10 minutes. The rice grains are hydrated and most of the water is gone, so I'm going to wrap this with some cling wrap so it's airtight. Could also do this with foil for a less airtight seal. Now I'll just let that steam for another 8 or so minutes. Nice, that's perfectly done. Grains stay separate and rice is perfectly cooked. To be fair, basmati is harder to mess up. Just I go fluff the rice and remove the skillet and thyme. Have to remove that scotchy too. Don't want to bite into that accidentally. This smells really rich and tastes absolutely delicious, nutty and flavorful. Alright, rice done, so let's check in back on the oxtail. It's reducing nicely. By the time it's completely reduced, the oxtail should be cooked. If not, I would have to add a bit more water. As expected, the younger oxtail are cooked completely and falling off the bone already, but the older ones are still firm. We are really close to the end, so I'm adding half cup diced potatoes and half cup diced carrots. This really makes the stew more hearty. Also want a bit of chopped garlic to introduce some fresher flavors so it's more punchy. This smells so good. All those flavors are really coming together now. Good. That needs maybe 15 more minutes. Nice, that's done cooking, but I'm adding some bell peppers and onions for some more fresh flavors and appearance. Some fresh scotchy is also going to add a ton of scotch bonnet flavor and a bit of extra spice. This is 1 can of broad beans. Can't have oxtail without creamy broad beans or butter beans. This is nice. We spent a lot of time really layering flavors, so I know this is going to be so good. That looks really great, but first let's test this. Gosh, perfect. These are the younger oxtail, just a few completely cooked off the bone, but it's not a waste because all this is in the oxtail gravy. The older ones are cooked nicely though. Alright, you know I have to plate it up. Coconut gungo basmati rice and peas, we know this good. Brown stew or braised oxtail, have to have some of those vegetables and gravy. And let's complete this with some freshly shredded lettuce, carrot, beets, a few tomato wedges, and finally finish that off with some chopped cilantro. And that's a solid plate of goodness. It doesn't quite have that fall off the bone thing I was looking for, but it's still really tender, and it's complemented perfectly by that rice and peas. Absolutely delicious. This was great. Thanks squad for 25k subs. It's really encouraging. If you want to see some more Sunday dinner, check out this video next.